why do investors act irrationally? And I want your take on this. But what I was thinking is, we have a limbic brain, which is like our primal brain, our, 2 million year old brain, or one that's there to protect us. And then we have our prefrontal cortex, which is more developed and really where we make more logical decisions. What I'm curious about and what I want to get your intake on is what's going on when investors are making irrational decisions. And I'm assuming it's because they're coming more from that fear center as compared to factual information.
The fight or flight.
Yeah.
Like the market. And then there's a reason why they call it a bear market, right? It's the idea that a bear is chasing you.
Oh gosh, yes. Hi, my name is Annette Ba'u, your host of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. I'm a certified financial planner and founder of the Millionaire Insider. For over 30 years, I have been advising and researching the top 1% of millionaires, and I am passionately obsessed with money, mindset, and the intersection of self-worth and net worth, and how the two connect and allow us to live fulfilled and wealthy lives on our terms. I'm a Midwestern girl who had a dream, began investing $25 a month 35 years ago, and today have a multi-million-dollar net worth. I teach the tried and true that only someone with over 3 decades of experience advising millionaires would know. This podcast is different, about much more than money. We talk about mindset, success, money blocks, worth barometer, and all aspects of money and topics from practical manifestation, along with real-world how-to and everything in between, with the goal of making your journey easier and more fun. Think of this as coffee, actually matcha tea, learning real-world common sense money and life advice from a BFF that you can start applying today. If you want to create a financially free life you love, you are in the right place, my friend. This is the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. So today we're diving into behavioral finance, and you are going to be blown away by this because what we dive into is how some people, specifically investors, act emotionally when they're making decisions and the havoc it can have on your money, even your quality of life because of the way you make decisions, the fact that you're going to earn less and ultimately have less in retirement. In fact, the area of behavioral finance, in my opinion, is one of the most fascinating studies. And even though they don't talk a lot about how your brain works, what you're going to see is that there's so much of it where people are making irrational, illogical decisions because they're coming from their child, their toddler, their primal brain, as compared to coming from their prefrontal cortex, where they are much more strategic and methodical in what they're doing and how they're doing it. And the one thing I can guarantee you, there's not a lot of things I can guarantee, but one thing I can guarantee you is that if you learn how to make decisions in a calm, cool, and collected manner and not make irrational decisions either on the buying side or on the selling side, the odds that you're going to be better off are much greater. So you're going to love today's episode because you're going to really learn what to do. And you're also going to find why it's so important to have support either from an advisor or from a coach or from someone who can help you through those tough times. One of the things I always said in my career, and I still say it, is that you never really truly find out what a person's risk tolerance is until you go through a down market, because everyone is an aggressive growth investor when the market's going up. But when the market goes down, and especially when it drops dramatically, that's when you really can see a person's risk tolerance. So it's just really important to get a grasp of how you make decisions and to do what you can so that you're not making irrational decisions and ultimately losing money, having additional stress, and really suffering in the long haul because it's going to affect every aspect of your life, including your money. For today's show notes, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/7. For all episodes, go to themillionaireinsider.com/podcast. The information we provide is not intended to replace any investment, financial, tax, or any other advice. Before beginning, please consult with your own team of advisors and review your situation. You agree to hold MillionaireSeries.com, Annette Ba'u, and all affiliates harmless for information contained in these trainings. All international copyrights are reserved. So today's bonus resource is our retirement plan checklist. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/RPC for retirement plan checklist. You're going to love this free resource because it provides you an overview of the actions you need to take to avoid worrying about running out of money. And it's going to help you to ensure you're going to live your life and retirement on your terms. We share insights in this free retirement planning checklist resource that many people don't even think about. So again, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/RPC to access it. One of the biggest concerns women have is becoming a bag lady. This guide was specifically designed to provide you the first step to help you create a plan so you can stop worrying about running out of money. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/RPC. You're going to love this resource. So let's dive in. So I'm so excited. You're going to get to meet Jennifer Napper today. She's a certified financial planner and a certified divorce financial analyst. She specializes in helping anyone facing a life transition, such as retirement, divorce, or loss of a loved one. She offers the insight and guidance you deserve to protect your wealth and create a plan for your future. The thing I love about Jennifer is she's just got a wealth of information. She was very successful in her previous career. She is articulate. She is spot on. She's like, get it done, but she still has the soft, compassionate side. You know, sometimes you meet people and they're like, so get it done. And you're like, oh my gosh. But she really balances the nurturing side with the action side. What do we need to do to get a plan to make sure you're taken care of? Today, we're talking about behavioral finance. And it's something that you may be actually a little surprised about it because some people say, oh yeah, some people act irrationally when it comes to investing. But we dive deep into a lot of different concepts, and she really explains different ways in which we show up that are serving us and ones that are really wreaking havoc and what to do about it in practical ways that really anyone can do. So it's so exciting to have you on the call, Jennifer. I want to welcome you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
I've known Jennifer now for several years. And one of the things that I love about you is that you are so well read and you are such a phenomenal communicator, like so clear. And it's amazing. I just love that.
Well, thank you. You know, it comes from, I think, having a passion and a curiosity for people in their lives.
Yeah, it's amazing because a lot of us that are good at numbers aren't necessarily as good at that. And you
That
really
is true.
are. And one thing I like about you, Jennifer, is, I mean, you're pretty bottom line, you know, you get it done. And out of all of the advisors that I am certifying, I think that you really have added a value of like, you know, you're punctual. It's like, get it done, what needs to be done. And I love that. I love that. It's not kind of like willy-nilly, you know, what's going to happen. And so that's, I think, a huge trait, especially when it comes to money and finances. So anyway, I want to commend you on that.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm sure a therapist could pick that apart and explain why.
Oh, yeah. I win that one. I've had more therapists in my life than probably most people, but
some childhood trauma somewhere.
Oh, seriously. Yeah. So anyway, so we're talking about a topic today that literally is like so important. And what I love about behavioral finance is long before I knew that there was actually a study of it, I experienced my father's investing, and I kid you not, it was crazy. The market would go up, it'd be at an all-time high, and he would go buy. And I'm like, what are you doing? And it would drop and he would sell. And I was like, this is the most bizarre behavior. And I mean, here I am in the business saying, you know, that's just a disaster. And he would worry so much that he just couldn't handle it. He'd feel like I'm losing out, and then he would go the other way. So can you just start by sharing with our listeners, what is behavioral finance?
Well, and it is a study that's really evolved in the years that I've been an advisor. It's really evolved over time, and there's been a lot more research and a lot more writing about it and a lot more training for those of us who are in this practice to understand it. And so what behavioral finance is really understanding the psychology of money and understanding the unconscious biases that shape our financial decision-making. So we're all making financial decisions every day. Some of them are little ones, like what size coffee do I buy? And some of them are bigger, like, should I lease or buy my car? And then some of them are huge, like, how do I invest my long-term earnings so that to make sure that when I retire, that I can enjoy the same lifestyle as I had before and not run out of money. So there's this big spectrum of decisions that we have to make in our lifetime, and understanding what motivates you to make and how you make those decisions can be very impactful in the overall outcome of those decisions.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was going to say, why is it important? But you just nailed it on the head. I mean, like, you're making decisions on what to do with your retirement. And if you're making emotional decisions, it could be great or it could be terrible, right? And let's talk about that for 1 minute, because one of the things that I see, especially when people like do it themselves versus somebody have an advisor, do you feel like the biggest barrier, the biggest challenge with people that say are trying to do it themselves and don't have an advisor they can call before they panic and make a mistake is the fact that they're making more emotional based decisions?
100%. And sometimes you want to kind of do your own gut check and what feels right for you, but you have to fuse that with rational decision making. And do you have all the information that you need to make that decision? And so sometimes we have kind of a narrow sense of knowledge about it, and getting more information is never a bad thing. But on the flip side, then I see people who want more and more and more information and be paralyzed by the information and then never make one.
Like analysis paralysis.
Absolutely. And so as an advisor, part of what I do is to help people kind of navigate based on their own preferences for how they make decisions. Do you need a lot of information? Do you need a bit of information? Do you need it in written form? Do you need it in graph form? So that you feel comfortable that the decisions you're making at the time were in your best interest with the available knowledge that we had.
Oh, that's great. So as I was preparing for this and I was thinking about it, and I am obsessed with like neuroscience and the mind. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking that, why do investors act irrationally? And I want your take on this. But what I was thinking is, we have a limbic brain, which is like our primal brain, our, 2 million year old brain, or one that's there to protect us. And then we have our prefrontal cortex, which is more developed and really where we make more logical decisions. What I'm curious about and what I want to get your intake on is what's going on when investors are making irrational decisions. And I'm assuming it's because they're coming more from that fear center as compared to factual information.
The fight or flight.
Yeah.
Like the market. And then there's a reason why they call it a bear market, right? It's the idea that a bear is chasing you.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh
might be it. Well, and first let's define irrational. So it doesn't mean that when you make what behavioral finance might call an irrational decision, doesn't mean you're an irrational person, right? It just might mean that at that moment, maybe you made an irrational decision based on the data that we know. So for instance, have we ever run through the car wash the day before it rains? Right. So you spent money on the car wash and you didn't need to because Mother Nature was going to take care of it for you the next day. So why did we make that decision? Because we didn't believe it was going to rain. We always get our car washed on Sunday. So I'm not going to deviate from a pattern. Like, where does that come from? And so what if it's a $9 car wash and you had a clean car when you didn't need to? That doesn't matter. But what if it's not $9? What if it's a $9,000 decision or a $90,000 decision? It becomes more important to understand how we make decisions. And sometimes we can just acknowledge it and say, this is how I do it. And it's the whole spectrum. So you mentioned earlier, how your dad makes decisions. And so there is that FOMO, fear of missing out. I got to do it because I don't want to miss something that all my neighbors are taking advantage of. And then the other is, and what a lot of research has identified, is that sense of loss aversion, that I will make decisions because I'm so fearful of losing something that I just rather not do anything at all. And then missing out on what would be a logical progression of wealth building because you're too afraid, and understanding where that might come from. And again, it might be anything from a previous experience that you want to avoid, or the way that your parents taught you about money.
Oh, wow. So one of the things you said, which I want to just dive a little into, it's a little bit off of this, but it's one of the things where, there's all this movement where people will be like, they're teaching people how to do money. And they're like, you can still have your latte. And one of the things that I feel, and I want your take on this, is it's kind of like, it's not the $5 or $7 latte. It's the latte and the purse and the trip. And what I think a lot of times people don't understand is when you say yes to something, you're inherently saying no to something else. And do you feel that thought process where it's like, I remember once for this financial planning association, I was a spokesperson and I would go into people's situation and they would, video me. And this woman I remember goes, I deserve it. And I'm like, well, don't we all deserve it? She goes, I work hard. And I'm thinking, me and the producer are looking at each other like we work really hard. And I was listening to her rationalization. And even though it's a little bit different than, maybe behavioral finance from a perspective of investing, walk me through, like, when people make those decisions and then they start justifying it like, I deserve it. Because even at where I am financially, I still think going and getting like a $5 or a $7 drink is a big deal. Whereas I look at people that have not even a fraction of my net worth, think it's like, it's just expected. So can you walk me through that?
Sometimes I think it's just a fatigue. So when I'm working with somebody and I say, we need to understand what money comes in and what money comes out.
Mm-hmm.
But to do that only for a couple of months, because after a while you get kind of budget fatigue and you go, I am so tired of living so lean and mean. Forget it. I'm going to go out and blow some money on something that maybe doesn't make sense, but I'm just so tired of having to live like this and I deserve it. So I'm going to go out and buy those, designer boots. But at the same time, I also see people who are so anxious about every penny that's spent. And I have several clients where I'm telling them, you're going to have a lot of money left over. Are you sure there isn't something you would like to do that would give you some fulfillment or satisfaction, contributing to your favorite charities so that you can enjoy it in your lifetime?
Yeah.
So it really kind of goes through the whole spectrum of where our thoughts are about money and where it comes from. And can we pivot and navigate through some of that by working with an advisor that said, you know what? Fine, here's your fun money, knock yourself out. Mm-hmm. But let's also build a playbook and a strategy to make sure that you have the opportunity to go out and buy the designer boots or the lattes without jeopardizing, without self-sabotaging the game plan.
So I love that. And I think from a practical standpoint, that's great. If somebody is suffering from that, I had one client that she would not even drive to the grocery store. She would ride her bike. And I was like, oh my God, that's like over the top, because she didn't want to spend money on gas. And she was a multimillionaire. It wasn't like she needed the money. And it was just such an extreme. Right. Do you have anything that you recommend for a person other than like practical, where you're working with them, but where they can do to deal with those extreme emotions?
Well, and part of it is back to that playbook of compartmentalizing the resources that you have so that you can do those sorts of things. So if she wants to ride her bike, I think that's great.
Well, she doesn't want to ride her bike. She's riding it because she doesn't want to spend money on gas. So.
And I worry less about my savers than I do my spenders. So it's not the worst thing in the world to have too much money left over. And then it's what happens with your estate. But if that makes her feel safe, where it worries me on that are people who want to run so lean and mean or so afraid to use money that it actually does compromise their safety or their health. And I see that as people get older. As people get older, and it would be safer to have somebody come into the house and help with long-term care needs, but they don't want to do it because they don't want to spend the money. And what I do is like, okay, let's set some money aside and earmark it, and it's in a separate account. And I want you to feel comfortable that when the time is right, that we can use that. Or another thing is, let's buy some long-term care insurance, because you'll come to a point where it's like, well, I spent all that money on it. Darn it, if I'm not going to find a way to use it because I've already invested in it. So there's different ways of compartmentalizing our money for now, later, or much later, and for specific uses. So you feel safe and okay about using it for that purpose.
I love that. One thing I would add to that, and you might have a comment on this, is I think like if you really are fearful, there's been a lot of research on when people are really fearful. And one of the things they find is that their amygdala, their fear center, is larger. And one of the remedies of that is like focused breathing or even meditation. And I think that some of those things, I know because I grew up in a very fearful environment. My father had gone through the Depression, and it was kind of like money was a really bizarre topic. But do you have any comments on that or input to add to that as far as like emotional things that somebody can do to, lower their level of fear?
I think those are all exactly. And part of it is just recognizing it and identifying it and saying it's there, right?
Yeah.
Acknowledging that it's there, and then whatever tools to help you get grounded about it. So it might be, like you mentioned, it might be around your faith and meditating or taking really long walks. Or does it help to write things down and visualize and see, or make a storyboard around what you want to accomplish in your life and what those goals are, and match those against where that fear might be coming from? And on the reverse side, I came from family where they didn't really think about money. It was like, I don't know where it's going to come from, and we're just going to move one step at a time and hope it works out, right? And hope is not a good strategy. And so kind of reeling yourself in and saying, I really do have to have a plan about how this is going to play out if I live to be in my 90s. And guess what? We all know somebody who's lived into their 90s. So we have to put kind of our Captain Reality hat on and say, it could happen. So, how do we do that? There are money coaches that kind of fuse together those fears or that anxiety around money, and helping with little exercises to get you used to having a stronger relationship with money as well.
No, that's good. And I want to just add one thing to that, which has changed my belief too around areas where, say, you do have triggers. Because some of you may say, oh, well, I don't have a trigger around that. But then you do when it comes to investing, thinking you're going to make a mistake or something like that. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I encourage you to do is when you feel that fear, just sit in it for a little while.
Yeah.
And notice, like, okay, right now I'm feeling a little sweaty. I'm feeling a little anxious. Mm-hmm. And train your limbic, your primal brain, that you're going to still live. You're okay. Because I think we're so wired, and I don't know if it's from our ancestors or what, but we're so wired of like, oh, we could get attacked, or, oh, that bear is coming after us, whatever it may be. And when we realize you can get through it and it's not the end of the world, I find that helps some people too. So that's something that I think is huge.
And sometimes those feelings are justified. I work with a lot of individuals and couples going through divorce, and that fear is real.
Yeah.
Your life is completely being turned upside down. And especially if you don't have a lot of financial literacy because it wasn't your job in the relationship.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you're being told, the life that you were living is being completely changed, and you don't know if you're going to have enough money or not.
Right.
So I have a lot of folks who come to me in pure terror. And part of the journey is to educate and take those baby steps to see, okay, where can you afford to live? Should you be shopping at Costco versus Whole Foods? And kind of reshaping your life to fit into a place where you feel safe and comfortable. And it is remarkable, Annette, where I'll see even after a few months, folks go from that place of terror to, I can do this. I see how it's going to work now. And for me as an advisor, that is why I do what I do. It is so fulfilling, to see people see the light.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that I think on that note is I love it when somebody is fearful and they still move forward anyway.
Yes.
Versus somebody that's scared to death. And you might even be somebody listening to this. You're like, I'm scared to death. I don't know if I have enough money, or if we have enough money, and you do nothing about it. The one thing I know for sure is doing nothing is never ideal, because if you do something while you still have an option, then you have choices. But some people wait and then they're boxed in and they have no choice. And, there's this book, Retire Broke. And I'm like, there needs to be a sequel of actual stories who do that. I've yet to see anyone where people are retiring broke where it's a pretty picture. Meaning, if we knew the day we were going to die, yeah, I can understand that. But what I find fascinating, now, some of the questions in that book I think are good to ask. But when your focus is spending all of it so that you don't have any to leave, that is so dangerous. But I think there's a lot of people who are just so much enjoying their life right now. I always say you got to plan for the future, live in the present, and deal with the past or complete it. But there's a lot of people that are also just living in the present, enjoying it. I feel good. Well, that's good. You feel good now because you better get all you can because you're going to be living pure hell in about 10, 20 years.
And sometimes it is quite an epiphany and an aha moment. Because part of what I do is I put those numbers on paper.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when you're looking at a graph that says, based on your current income sources and your savings pattern and your expense pattern, you will run out of money at age 72. How do you feel about that?
Oh,
right. All of a sudden, that really brings that to light. But you still have people go, my kids will take care of me. And you go, do the kids know that?
Oh, plus, like, really? Do you want your kids taking? That's a terrifying thought, right?
And in some cultures and in some families, that's 100% true. So it's really honoring, where people come from and what their culture is and their lifestyle, because that may be true. But for most of us, that can be a real eye opener. And then it's enough for people to say, oh, okay, I need to make some changes. Can you help me understand what my options are and what the pros and cons of each one of those options could be so that I have a range of outcomes and understand? Eyes wide open, whatever it is, eyes wide open.
Well, and on that note about thinking that your kids are going to take care of you, one of my friends' daughter had a friend who ended up having to go to a treatment center, and it was like an emergency one. And her roommate was of another culture where it's expected that you take care of the family. And she was in there because she tried to commit suicide because her family expected her to take care of them. And she didn't want to. She's like, I want to go to college.
Or how terrifying.
I know. And it was so sad because I thought, before you make those decisions that somebody's going to take care of you, you've got to make sure that they're on board and that, that they're qualified. I remember one of my clients, she found out that she was terminal and she's like, I don't care what happens to me. I just do not want to be left home with my husband. He is not capable of caring for me. And I was like, and she goes, you can't tell him that, but I am terrified that that's what's going to happen. And I thought, sometimes we just got to think about the scenarios before it actually happens is my thought process.
And it's hard, when you go to do your estate planning and they ask you all these questions, how long do you want to be on life support before they pull the plug? Those are not easy questions to answer.
Yeah.
And it can cause a lot of stress.
Yes.
And so you do have to approach those in kind of the pace, in the manner that you feel comfortable with. And also seek out, there's lots of professionals out there where we have a lot of experience in this. This is where we want to help.
Yeah.
This is where we want to guide and advise.
No, that's really
lean
good.
On us. So because we lean on everybody else for sure.
No, I think that's huge. But let's talk for 1 minute about the cost of irrational behavior, specifically related to money. Because obviously it makes sense that it affects the person, but what's the bigger issue?
So depending upon where that's showing up. And so there's a lot of terms that we use in behavioral finance. So one of them is herd mentality, right? So, well, everybody else is doing this and investing this way, and I don't want to miss out. And so I'm going to do what everybody else is going to do. Well, we've seen what the cost of that could be, even recently in whether it's the Bitcoin industry or everybody kind of riding a ride around a certain stock because everybody's doing it. And all of a sudden it comes crashing down. And then everybody is like surprised that, well, it seemed to work for other people. Why didn't it work for me? And so to be very careful about just following the herd, right? Doing what everybody else is doing, because it might not be in your best interest. Other costs, and you referred to it early, is this like kind of mental accounting of, I'm going to treat certain kinds of money differently. So for instance, I'm going to I'm going to spend more on vacation than I would spend normally because I deserve it. And that may be true as long as you've allocated or earmarked that money. But we have to make sure that we always are looking at the big picture and making sure that when you get that big bonus or that big windfall, that how you fuse that into your overall plan, because you can end up running out of money, when you're not 72 or when you're 72, or you have so much anxiety and stress through the process that you're making decisions based on or listening to people because you're trying to find that magic bullet and they don't always have your best interest.
And they may not even know what's going on, right? I mean, that's where I think it can be so dangerous because like using an advisor, somebody that knows what's happening and paying attention is very different than, you've got a friend that said this or a friend's friend said this and you're like, based on what? I mean, that to me is like terrifying, right? I mean, because then you don't even know if it's based on fact or it's just based on, like a lot of people, an emotion or they own the stock. They want it to go up. So they're telling everyone else to buy it. Right.
Well, and they're trying to validate their own decisions. Yeah. I bought this and I'm super smart. And so if you buy it too, then that validates the decision that I made. And working with an advisor who's listening to you and where you come from and helping you to build that game plan, that blueprint that acknowledges your risk tolerance, that acknowledges what your goals are and educates you with the options that best suits you. And don't just go though with what the advisor says. It has to be something you understand. It makes sense for you. It's not just I'm the advisor and just do as I say and don't ask questions, right?
Just
walk away from that. Walk away from that. You need to totally understand what it is and how it impacts you and the risks involved. And do those risks match your ability to wake up in the morning and not feel stressed?
Oh, no, I think that's huge. So let's talk about things that you can do relating to avoiding like emotional investing. Like, are there some tips you would have for people that say, okay, I'm emotional. Either I go and buy something on impulse or, I go and sell, because the market's going down or I read the news or whatever it may be. Do you have some tips that can help people in that area?
I think just understanding that, and there are some quizzes out there that you can take the quiz and then kind of laugh at yourself and say, oh, yes, I do that. I make those decisions. Does it make sense? No, I do rationalize it. And that's fine. And like I said, eyes wide open. We all need to recognize kind of where we are in that big spectrum. In addition to that, and going, okay, what are my goals? And doing that at a time, maybe not when you're at your most stressful time or your happiest time, but a more stable part of your life, because we tend to make irrational decisions when we're on either end of the spectrum.
More emotional,
rather than saying, I made these decisions at a good time of my life when I was feeling good and stable, not when we're in the middle of a recession and I'm feeling really, really fearful, and write them down. And whether you write them down or you work with a plan, advisor who documents it in a financial plan, because it's always good to go back and look and say, okay, but remember, this was your goal. Is that still your goal? And why has it changed? Because something's happened, and it's okay to pivot, but let's keep our eye on the target. So writing down those goals and reviewing them, if not quarterly, at least, annually. Second, and we've talked about this, is educate yourself. There's lots of information on Google, or again, working with an advisor who can explain how that would work and how it would work for you specifically, not just generically, how do they work, but how would this impact you? And third, working with a trusted advisor who is an independent advisor. We're all human. So we all, I have my own personal subconscious biases too.
Yeah.
But somebody who's independent and is working with your best interest in mind, we call those fiduciaries, and isn't swayed by biases of, well, I don't have a license to sell that, so I'm not even going to talk about it. Or, my company's put me on a quota, so I need to sell more of these to keep my job. Really working with somebody who can work in a framework of independence.
Yeah. And I want to really hone in and make sure everyone heard her. I think that is a $1 billion nugget, is that you are making these decisions and you're thinking this through when you're not in an emotional state, like where you're not, so fearful or having anxiety or overwhelm, or you're so excited and motivated, but where you're just more of a charge neutral. Because the whole point is when you're in one of those emotional states, that's probably where you're more likely to make one of those irrational decisions, right? I mean, that's huge. And I think that goes for just even buying something you really don't need. But, it's kind of like in the thing that I published, the 3-day rule. I had this friend of mine and she said, people that shop in the malls have holes in their souls. And she happens to be a psychologist. She's one of my best friends. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, they're going and buying that stuff to fill a void within themselves. And see, I think this can happen with whether you have a ton of money or no money, is that if you don't feel full inside, you start making decisions that are to try to get you to feel. And I can remember even back when I would do more impulse buying, is that, you go buy that purse, or you go buy that, or boots or whatever. I remember I was on a TV and the woman's like, oh, my thing are boots. And, but what can I get them when they're great ones and I get them on a deal? And, she's going on her whole rationalization. But I think the issue is when you have that impulse, part of it is learning not to. And then the other part is saying, am I in this emotional state? Because see, the 3-day rule is where you leave the store, you go and make sure you can afford it. And then if you can afford it and you really need it, then you go back. And see, most people won't, because most people aren't going to drive, 30 or 40 minutes to go back to buy something they can't afford and they don't need. It's like building that muscle, right? It's kind of like, going to the gym, getting your muscles, you're just dealing with a different muscle.
And doesn't that become so much harder now because everything's online? So you have to you have to sort of walk away from your iPhone, right, for 3 days and say, is this really an impulse buy, or is this something that I think I really, quote, need? Or even if you don't need it, have I set aside, here's my budget, here's my play money, this is how I want to spend my play money?
Oh, that draws me to another question. So one of my clients, it's so funny because we always go through this analysis where what are their values? What do they care about? And then we have them track their time. And I'm like, wait, I don't see QVC anywhere here on your values. And yet you're spending like 8 hours a day on QVC. And I kid you not, I didn't realize this, but people that are like compulsive buyers, they actually have it where you can put it on like a limit of what they can buy. And I mean, she was buying things that was just crazy. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do here? Because it turned out to be, fortunately, there was another trustee involved with her. But I mean, she would just go buy it and it would make her feel good. Like she'd feel so good at the time, but then like her daughter would come over and she'd have this entire room full of stuff she hadn't even like opened. Like, because some of us, we're talking about like ourselves here on this, or people that are listening, but what about parents or kids that have that tendency? Would you have any recommendations on what people can do in that situation? I mean, obviously QVC obviously has an issue with it because they have things you can put in place where people can't buy past a certain limit. And I mean, I don't know all the details, but they've got some safeguards in place, but I would love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, that's almost a topic that's like so much bigger. And having an 18-year-old in college who definitely has a retail therapy issues, and it's hard to say, no, Mom, I really need these, this coat and these boots because it's so cold here. And trying to find that balance as a parent is so hard. And for me, we've set up rules around, I will buy these things, I will buy the basics, socks and underwear, but graphic t-shirts and concert merch and all that's got to be on you. So you need to get a job or borrow the money through a student loan and to set those restrictions. And it's hard. The saddest thing that I see is parents who continue to enable kids into their adult to the point where they're sacrificing their own financial well-being because they want to help their kids.
Yeah. Or even like in my situation where it's just such a hassle, like my one son, it's like, fine, just give him extra money. But I'm like, he's got 1 year left and we're not extravagant. Believe me, I hear every day about how how terrible we are compared to his other fraternity brothers. I'm like, well, then you should have probably been adopted by them, right? Because we have different rules. And, we're the way we have money because of the way we are. And, trying to teach them the difference between rich and wealthy. And I mean, all those things. But that said, I think it's so important. And obviously, we all have different comfort levels as far as, what's acceptable. Like, I'm willing to give him more money for food if he's eating healthy. Right. And he has to prove it to me. But, he's spending more money on food than like families of 5. And I look at that and I was like posting this group and everyone's like, are you talking like a month of what he's eating in a week? I go, no, this is a week. But, both of my boys are athletes. They're, they eat 5 meals a day. It's not the same gauge. That said, I think you hit it on the head, not just, enabling them to where it's not even sacrificing for you, but enabling them to think this is how it's going to be. Because we're not planning on having our kids on our payroll for the rest of their life. And so I'm like, you've got to start really, I'm anal about them having a budget. What do you spend? And I think that can be a tough act because even if you do have the money to do that, that's not always the best course. Wouldn't you agree?
And it's hard because they're looking at us as parents and saying, well, wait a minute, you're driving a nice car, and you're buying clothes. So why can't I? So it's not their fault. They're just products of their environment. And coming from an environment where I never asked my parents for money because they didn't have it.
Right.
It wasn't even a thought in my head to do it. And they're coming from, a different place and it's not their fault, but we're not doing them any favors by just letting them run amok. I know it's hard.
Our favorite line is, we're wealthy, you're not. You're a struggling college student. So, and it's so funny because my husband never said that. And he's heard me say it so many times that like, now I'm hearing him say it when he's complaining that I need more money. You're not giving me enough money. And we have money.
You must not love me. If you loved me more, you would get me a better car.
It's fascinating. It's just interesting. But this has been so insightful. We've got to have another podcast with you. This has been so good. But do you have anything else you want to leave our listeners with that can really help them? This has been so helpful.
Well, I think it's about being kind to yourself, being honest with yourself. And for most people, it does help to either keep a journal or keep track of and look honestly at where you're spending your money. And you can laugh at it a little bit and say, wow, I guess I can go from the venti down to the tall coffees, and save some. Not so worried about that. But are you engaging in behavior that is sabotaging, or do you have a healthy relationship with money? And working with professionals to help you explore where that comes from and how to get on track to have that kind of financial wellness that you see for yourself and your family.
Oh, I love that. Kind, honest, being true to yourself, having a plan. That's really it, right? I mean, it's great. So I would just want to say, some of you probably love this conversation as much as I did. In fact, I think this is like priceless. And I mean, I've seen and heard so many things over the course of my career. So I do really want to thank you, Jennifer. This has been great. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/Jennifer Napper, Napper, or you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/support-request. And there you can just say that you want to connect with Jennifer. I mean, you can see why I just love her. She's got so much insight. Her communication is amazing. She gets not just the technical side, but also the emotional, the psychology of money. And in my opinion, that is critical because if you only have one, so many advisors are so focused just on the technical side. And that's like, maybe I would say about 40% of the equation. I think like the emotional side, the psychological side is probably about 60 to 70%. And so you've seen what a wealth of insight she is. And so anyway, I'm just so honored to be able to work with you and to have you getting certified. And it's just amazing. So I want to thank you so much.
Thank you, Annette. And it's all about taking that next step. Let's make a plan.
Amen. All right. Thanks again. Congratulations on taking another step to create a financially free life you love. If you're not sure about your financial future or that it's in order, or you are ready to stop worrying about money or possibly the fear of becoming a bag lady, ending up broke in retirement, or you simply are ready to know your financial house is in order, so that you can have a bright financial future, please go to themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. And that doesn't stand for non-sufficient funds. It stands for Next Step Finance. It's the next best step of what you need to do so you can avoid an NSF notice in your future. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. The number of women who were not broke or poor while working or married is staggering. The entire mission of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast is to ensure you have the information for you, your family, your friends, anyone who's willing to listen to it and apply it so that you can create a financially free life you love. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. If you love the content of this podcast, please follow and subscribe to our channel so you get notified of episodes, and also give us a 5-star review and share a comment. We really appreciate it. Until our next episode, take one action that will help you create a financially free life you love. I'm Annette Ba'u, your host. All international copyrights are reserved. Bye for now.